Welcome back to a special edition of the Livin Vida Low-Carb Show with Jimmy Moore. And today I am pleased to welcome back to the podcast a gentleman who was with us in August of 2009. He is the president of Dreamfields. His name is Mike Crowley, and he's here to address some concerns that a lot of us in the low-carb community have been hearing about from our readers, or even expressing ourselves about the Dreamfields pasta product. Now, there's certainly no, this is nothing new, basically, to the low-carb community. Ever since Dreamfields was introduced as a low-carb pasta, or at least a pasta good for people on the low-carb lifestyle, there's been controversy about it, Mike, and I certainly appreciate your willingness to come back on the show to address some of that controversy and a brand new study that came out just this year on your product. So welcome back.
Well, thanks, Jimmy, and I always appreciate coming back. And actually, like I said, when we were together back in August of '09, I think it was, you know, any time that there's questions about the product, you know, we want to be absolutely as transparent as we possibly can to people. So, you know, so I'm here to answer the questions as best we can this morning, and, you know, let's see where we go.
Well, and there are some very difficult questions to ask, and we'll certainly get to those here in due course. But I just finished listening back to that interview again from August 2009, and I had a few questions based on that before we kind of get into this study that compared your pasta to regular pasta. But I was listening back, and when you have done comparisons to the Dreamfields product, it was based on the glycemic index, so you compared it to white bread. But have there ever been any in-house studies that looked at white pasta versus your pasta?
The answer to that is we did one. Okay. We didn't do it initially because the glycemic index is really where we always want to compare because people understand the glycemic index and there's protocols to measuring the glycemic index and things like that. But several years ago we did do one just to see what would happen, and the results were pretty good. We did I think we had 10 people involved in it. We typically do not involve people that have pre-diabetes or diabetes. Okay. And there's some reasons for that we can talk about. But, you know, we did the one test, and the results from that internally to us basically were the same as what our claims were. And, you know, we used a major brand of white pasta, and we used exactly our same protocol on both. And, you know, that's how we did it. And we used white bread as the... We still did a glycemic index comparison. We didn't do just a glycemic response. We did a glycemic index calculation for the white pasta, and then we did it for the Dreamfields pasta, and then we compared the two. And the 65% reduction was, in round numbers, about the same. Right. You know, so that's what we did. I will say that since Dreamfields has come out, there's been one change in the formula. When we first brought the formula out, it included sorbitol. Not a very much sorbitol, but a small amount of sorbitol in it. Right. And we had a lot of people, particularly professionals, come back and say, you know, sorbitol is kind of a bad actor, and back in those days it was. You know, there was a lot of products that had a lot of sorbitol in them, and sorbitol can give you some bad effects, laxative effects and things. Yes, and so we said, okay, you know, we went back. We also, when we originally introduced a product, it had 4 grams of fiber in it instead of 5, and so we adjusted the formula, and I can't remember exactly what the date is on that, but it's been 3 or 4 years ago. We adjusted the formula to take the sorbitol out. We increased the inulin a little bit, so it increased our fiber count to 5, and the inulin went away. Okay. The test that I just told you about was done with the original formula, gotcha. Okay, because it was back there a ways ago. Okay, so recently, in the last 3 or 4 years, we have not done a head-to-head comparison test.
Sure. And okay. Since you're marketing this to diabetics and ostensibly people with metabolically damaged systems, otherwise they wouldn't be on a low-carb diet, why wouldn't you use them as part of your research?
Yeah, good question. Typically, the results that you get when you run a glycemic index on a person who has prediabetes or diabetes vary a lot, okay, from day to day,
right,
meal to meal. And if you're testing your blood sugar and you're a person with one of those conditions, you'll know that sometimes that you get a high reading and you really don't know why. I mean, you didn't do anything different that you knew about, but all of a sudden you get a higher reading or a lower reading. And when you put that into the framework of testing from a clinical point of view, the variation that you get in the numbers is really high. So we didn't do that. We had done a few, and we found that the numbers were very high, because the variation that you're getting is not only the result of the product, but it's the result of the person. And a person with those conditions has more variation than a person without those conditions. So one of the things that I'll talk about when we talk about our protocol is we screen the people that we test so that we know a fair amount about their metabolic process. I mean, we do a blood test on them to make sure that they are not diabetic or pre-diabetic. And what we're trying to do is get the results to be as consistent as they can be from one test to another, and to minimize the amount of variation that we get within any one person.
But wouldn't it stand to reason that if you're specifically marketing to that particular clientele, the low-carbers, the diabetics, which you told me in my last interview, that pretty much sums up about 90 to 95% of your entire purchasing audience, wouldn't you want to at least show them, all right, this is what happens with people like you?
Yeah. Well, what we do is if somebody we're not a medicine, we're a food, okay? Right. So we don't give medical advice. But when people come to us and they say, I'm taking this or that, and how do I adjust my medicines for this particular pasta, we tell them that our testing shows that your glycemic response is about as if you had 5 grams of carbohydrates, and so you should start there. Mm-hmm. But you should then measure after you eat the product, and you should measure that for 2 hours, after 2 hours. And then, if you have to adjust that, you should do that. Sure. And we don't, say that, it's going to be the same for every person kind of thing. Right. So that is the reason, okay, is that we're trying to get a number that we can defend, okay, from the point of view of having tests behind it. And at the same time, we're trying to be honest with people who use the product. Sure. Now, we do have what I'll call case studies, and we do have registered dietitians who work with us, and they use the product, and typically a person with diabetes or pre-diabetes, there's a lot of things that they're doing to their diet to try to improve things, and one of them may be the inclusion of Dreamfields as a product. And what we look for then is there an improvement with them over time? Right. And that those case studies have come back saying yes, there is, okay, and that's about as good as we have been able to do up to this point.
Well, in our previous interview, which again was in August of 2009, you were hoping that you were about 6 to 8 months away from having a peer-reviewed study of the Dreamfields product published in a medical journal. Has that happened? I haven't seen it.
It has not happened. Okay. I tell you, I have never issued, or I've never been involved with writing a peer-reviewed article before, and frankly, a little naive about that. Yeah. But we had a draft of the article which we sent to some people that we respect to look through and say, okay, here's what we want to put out. And actually, it included the data that I mentioned earlier, where we had done a comparison study with another pasta. And the input that we got back was, well, this is interesting, but really you should do a study that shows exactly the same product on exactly the same equipment with and without the difference between Dreamfields, okay? In other words, run a standard pasta on our equipment without the inclusion of the fiber and protein blend, mm-hmm. and then run another group another pasta on there, but include the fiber and protein blend, and then show the difference between those two.
Right.
Okay. And first of all, it took us several months to get to the point of having that feedback come back to us, and then we said, okay, let's think about how we might do that. Okay. And so we have been in the process of looking at that. And that is something that we would like to do, and that would help us get this peer-reviewed article out. Okay, so right. But we haven't published it because, frankly, we haven't felt that it's good enough yet to send out.
Sure. Now, earlier this year, there was a published study, and that's kind of why we're talking today, because it's got everybody up in arms in the low-carb community. There's a professor at the University of Minnesota named Dr. Mary C. Gannon, and she's a very famous low-carb researcher that's been out there for several years. I spoke with her just yesterday about this controversy, and I said, why'd you do this study that has really everybody up in arms? She said, well, the main reason they wanted to do it was, she does a diet called the low-bag diet, which is basically a low-carb diet that allows diabetics to be able to eat a certain way, and they wanted to see if Dreamfields could be a part of her low-bag diet. And so they said they contacted your company trying to get the actual data that you use. Now, one of the things that came into play was that data wasn't like readily available. Is there any data that's available that people can go seek out that shows what you're claiming the Dreamfields product does?
There's a couple pieces to that. Okay. Actually, I did not talk to Dr. Gannon. I emailed Dr. Nuttall, who was also involved with this. So we, as soon as the article came out, within hours, all of a sudden we got, okay, this is interesting. And what do we? And so I emailed Dr. Nuttall and said, okay, I need to really meet with you, and I'd like to sit down and talk face to face and understand how you did the test, what's different about the way you're doing the test and the way we do the test, and how does that going to work? And they're in Minneapolis. That's not where I live, but but I was going to be in Minneapolis actually the following month, and I gave them several dates that I could be there, and it didn't work out. The schedules didn't work out. So that still may happen yet, because I'd sure like to do that. Sure. But anyway, we did go back and forth, and I understood a little bit more about their protocol and kind of what they did in their test, and you may know that now too. So we can talk a little bit about that too. So, but I was very disappointed with the fact that even in the article they basically sort of made it sound that they tried to get a hold of us many times and we didn't respond, kind of thing. Now, we have an 800 number, which is a customer service number, and the person who answers that number is not a scientist. She's a customer service representative. She does a great job of answering the questions, and most of the questions we get have to do with coupons or recipes. And whenever a question comes up that has to do with the technical issues around Dreamfields, those get sent over to me, and then we decide exactly how we're going to deal with that. That never happened, and I don't know why that never happened. Okay, but it didn't. Okay, and we also, since Dr. Nuttall and that group is in Minneapolis, our sales office is also in Minneapolis. It's in St. Louis Park, which is just a little bit north of Minneapolis. Right. And I would say that, if people are trying to get a hold of us, you can do that. Yeah,
I called you just yesterday, and within 10 minutes, somebody had me in touch with you, and we were talking. So very quickly to get a hold of you. Yeah,
so I'm a little disappointed that came across as if we're trying to sort of hold something back or hide it, and I want to try to clear the air on that a little bit. People can call the number, and obviously there's not somebody there 24 hours a day, but it goes to an answering machine, they get screened, and they come back. The other thing is we get emails. We probably get 200 to 300 emails a month. And frankly, I read every one of them because they usually come dribbling in 8 or 10 a day, something like that. So it's in the morning. It's one of the first things I do is pull up the computer and read the various emails that come in. And again, a lot of them have to do with we'd like some coupons, we'd like some support for something that we're doing. We're having and we handle all that stuff. Sure. But again, if something comes in, it's a technical question. we deal with that, and as best we can, So I want to make sure that point is clear.
Sure.
In terms of data that's available on our website, we have a professional tab on the homepage, and if you click on the professional tab, there's a menu on the left which gives resources and downloads.
Mike,
and
let's give them the URL so they know what you're talking about.
Okay, it's www.dreamfieldsfoods.com.
Okay.